They want what?
Okay, folks, if you stand up, I'll lead you in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think what we'll do, since Malcolm is standing, we'll let Malcolm give us a report on what's happening with the Sports Authority. As you know, this is an historic scandal unfolding.
You know, about 2 months ago, Barry gave me 4 boxes of documents that he has saved from the early 90s all the way through on the Sports Authority. And I was blown away to the volume and the clarity and the patterns. I mean, in the investment business, what we do is we study patterns to see if we can predict the future or at least understand what has already happened. And it's very apparent after reading those articles and just from my own gut feel and the things that I know that massive fraud has been pulled on the public on the Sports Authority. One of the articles way back in the early 90s, written by then the county attorney, Mike Driscoll, said that you have to do, if you're going to give a land lease or a sale, it has to be at fair market value. Now, this hit a chord with me because at one point in time, I was negotiating with the city trying to get property out at Ellington Field. And the thing that Mayor Brown and his minions continued to put back into the conversation was it has to be done at fair market value. Now, when County Attorney Mike Driscoll and his assistant county attorney both wrote the letter and sent it to, at that time, the county judge, I guess, who was it back then in 94? Was it Lindsay? Lindsay.
County judge, yeah.
They said it was illegal and it has to be done at a fair market value. On that article was Barry's notes. They did it anyway, but Barry's notes said, why didn't he ask for an investigation? Question is, I don't know. And why don't they do that continually from here on out? That's the problem, because nobody holds them accountable. There has to be some. So this $26 million loan that was made by the county using funds illegally, that was footnoted by the county auditors as being an illegal transaction. They did it, and somebody should be held accountable. At that time, it would have been Judge Eccles and the county commissioners that were serving at that time, including Steve Raddick. Eversole was on there. I don't remember all the people that were on the county that was on the county commissioner's court, excuse me. So essentially, the article started detailing all these things that are not permitted and things that had been said, that the stadiums were not going to cost us any money, nothing. Now we find out, and there was an article in the paper, or excuse me, on the TV the other night, click2houston.com, that talked about, since 2009, over $7 million has been spent on maintenance of the dome.
Every year?
No, that's total since then. But essentially, nobody thought that we were going to have to pay for other things. For instance, they paid Drayton McLean $19.5 million for the naming rights to buy it back from him. Well, he got a great deal. What do we do with those naming rights? What strategic value has that brought anybody by buying it back? That came out of taxpayers' funds, $19.5 million. And if you look at the list that's been compiled by this reporter in his news feature the other night, you'll see all the things that we spent money on and continue to spend money, not just on the dome, but other things related to all the other stadiums that none of us were told about. So essentially, this thing has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've been to Dan Patrick's office multiple times trying to get him, and he was very involved back in the 90s on trying to stop the Sports Authority. But I guess since he's elected now, that's not his issue. So that's pretty much what I've found, and there's a possibility. First of all, there was the lawsuit that was ensued by the MBIA trying to get the county to recast and bring up the reserve account from $25 million up to $55 million, what is required. That is stated in the bond indentures. You can't change contract law. That lawsuit was thrown out recently, and I figured it was going to, and it'll have to go to appeals, but you cannot change contract law. It's written in the contract. I would assume if they go ahead and do the appeals, then it will be upheld, and the county will have to, or the Sports Authority will have to figure out how they're going to put money back into the pockets of the Sports Authority and recast it and put it back in together. But that's kind of the nutshell without going into too much more detail. Yes.
Channel 13, you investigated last year, I believe it was Toyota Center, where they put in a new scoreboard with $15 million that the taxpayers paid for. And that just benefits the team and the owner, you know. That's something that he should pay for himself, the owner of the team.
I think he did. He put it in. What they were complaining about is that any type of, first of all, they can't just do it without their authority. That was what, in fact, I was at that meeting in August when they kind of pulled him to the side and kind of gave him a backhanded, schoolhouse type of debating, or not debating, but scolding. But that was, I believe, what the issue was. He paid for it. It's just that he had to have approval in order to do that, and that was what the issue was.
The taxpayers paid for the last one.
Yeah, I thought so too.
That was on Channel 13 several times.
Could have been. I mean, that's the way I understood it, though. Yes, you had
Just one point. As I recall, the original price tag on the dome was $6 million.
No, it was higher than that. The dome actually went through, I think, three, or at least two new bond issues. They had to,
I mean, when they first set it out there and started building.
I know. We're talking about the 60s, right? The 1960s, right? Well, they actually cleared it with a bad number, a very low number. I think the legislature eventually had to cancel that, and there's another bond election was held, and so it was much higher than they first estimated. What's not generally known is that there's a major part of the cost was the infrastructure, the roads that got to that piece of land where they built the dome, and that was paid for by city taxpayers, but it's not part of the official numbers.
You had a question, sir?
Yeah, it's the core problem in the Sports Authority that the projections for revenue from attendance and so on are almost always inflated. Is that the core problem?
That's it, in that they made side deals with the Rodeo Association and the Texans that capped out what they were going to have to pay on their fees. That's pretty much the problem.
It tapped out their revenue, their available revenue, and left them short for their basic obligations.
That's correct.
Okay.
Am I correct that the basic reason for all of this sports business is simply that politicians really like to hang pictures on the wall of them with somebody who just hit a home run?
Well, they also like to get to use that suite that's available to public officials. There's a special suite set aside, and they get to schedule themselves to bring in their friends and donors.
But also the tax exemption gives an incentive that the county can build it. If the county can build it using tax-exempt bonds, then presumably that's cheaper than a private builder.
Right.
And that's part of the incentive to go through the county.
And another factor, too, is that some minority business people are in line to get the contracts, including Gracie Sines, our former councilwoman. She's got one of those subcontracts that was a part of I guess the benefits to the local politicians. They get to distribute those contracts.
Oh, one last thing. They voted down a bond issue in Florida just recently that would have paid for more bonds for the Sports Authority, and the revenues have fallen so short that they're now going to close one entire deck of a stadium in Florida.
That Miami Stadium is going to be a showcase for corruption and incompetence.
That New Orleans.
Yeah, but we've got those showcases in the case of rail all across the country. It doesn't seem to stop the local advocates because nobody spends any money in educating the local citizenry about how they're being defrauded. And so the scandals don't really become an object lesson for other cities, except for a few people who study these things but don't have the resources to do the outreach. Let's talk about another scandal, and that's more current. Well, it's I guess, a little bit now in our history, but recently the city of Houston created a new historic district, calling it Germantown. And of course, this group fought zoning back in 92, 93, which had a chapter devoted to historic preservation. Then they cut that out as a separate ordinance after we defeated it, and that was then put up, adopted by council, I think around 94. And then since then they put more teeth into it, and so now the controls are very strict, and we fought all those attempts to make it more difficult to live with ever since that first happened. And we fought some of the historic districts. And the most recent one was this newest one, the Germantown Historic District, which is an ersatz historic district. It's not really an historic district because there wasn't really anybody there except some farmers before it got developed, or circa 1910. But the advocates have gone deep into Houston history, come up with some references to this part of town known as Germantown, but only as a subdivision name or as a survey name, not actually as a settled community. And they managed to get the city hall to put this name on this area, which probably should be known as Grota Homestead, which was the name of the larger subdivision in this part of town. It's inside the Greater Heights area. It's to the west. For the most part, it's to the east of Houston Avenue and north of I-10, north of that park that's in that area. And so what I've given you is a couple of the documents I gave the city council to say you should not do this. You should send it back to the city planning department to do better research and even look at something more closely. There's some of the research I've already commissioned that shows that this was not a settled community, and it should have, if it's going to have a name at all, it should be called Grota Homestead Historic District. So what you see here on the first one, it says at the top Grota Homestead. It shows you that dotted line. That is roughly 1/4 of the John Austin land grant, and the proportions are wrong, but it actually is 1/4. And that little area that the arrow points to is actually to the east of Woodland Heights. And that's what actually they're talking about is the current name, so-called Germantown Historic District. So it's a case of the politicians didn't want to know the truth. I brought it to them with this documentation. They went ahead and did what the advocates wanted them to do. Now, if you look down the lower right-hand corner of that same map, you see the words Frosttown. And that's actually where one of these Germantowns of the Houston story, the narrative, existed. It actually reached east of there along what we now know as Canal Street. It was called German Street for many decades until World War I. And the problem with our understanding of this area as Germantown is that we don't have any contemporaneous sources from that time frame identifying it as such. It comes from people a generation or two later. So it becomes very difficult to sort out this story. But I'm very proud of my role in getting and determining this confusion. There's actually 3 parts of Houston that acquired the name Germantown. And our speaker today is a man who's actually done his own research, is helping to narrow down this confusion. And I'm hoping we'll see something on his website eventually which tells more of the detail of how we came to this misunderstanding of where the actual Germantown is. The other item is a better map showing you where the Grota Homestead subdivision is, and you'll see it is right next to West Montgomery Road. That's actually now North Main, and that's in my part of town. I live in the near north side. So I'm going to give you those 2 items.
If this is related kind of a situation, I'd be interested in any comments on the proposed annexation by the Uptown tax reinvestment district.
Okay, now that's a complicated story. You're talking about the tax incremental reinvestment zone that's going to be expanded to take in Memorial Park, right. And then they'll take some of the increased revenue off that TERS, the commercial, the part that's on the city's data. What's the words I'm missing here? On the tax base, and divert that over to some changes or enhancements for the park, including replacing the trees that were killed by the drought. the problem is that that's all simply money that would otherwise be going to the city's general treasury and could be allocated by city council to do that. It doesn't have to be put in the hands of the TERS board and have them do it. So what's really happening here? Well, I think the mayor, the story I've heard is the mayor has actually forced that uptown TERS to agree to this. They want to get permission from City Hall to use a large portion of their revenue over the next 20 or 30 years to pay for a BRT line, a bus rapid transit line, a fixed skyway line along Post Oak, which will duplicate all the drawbacks of rail, because there'll be buses stopping less frequently at stations, just like a train would. And so they're probably going to lose ridership over there. It's all very mysterious about why they're doing that, because all the evidence is in that it's a disaster. And I know that some of the chief advocates are fully acquainted with the sad story of transit misadventures across the country building fixed guideways. So more will be, I guess, over time we might learn more about why that strange decision is taking place. Now, it's not fully settled because the TxDOT has to chip in. This plan has TxDOT chipping in a bunch of money, and Houston Galveston Area Council board approving the money coming in from the feds. So the fight is not over. And that may be carried on to that level. I hope to be participating in that. They should not be taking those steps. They should simply have buses. Buses are a better kind of transit than any kind of mixture of buses with fixed guideway, whether it be a BRT or conventional light rail.
Jerry?
Yeah.
The church is also going to help take care of Memorial Park, right?
Georgia?
They won't be getting any income out of Memorial Park, but they're going to be helping
That's
maintain
what
it.
they're saying.
I'm sorry, George Nelson?
They're going to help to maintain Memorial Park. This is part of Mayor Parker's plan.
But right. But you understand, they're simply using tax dollars that would otherwise be going to the city, and the city would be maintaining as it currently does. It's not any new pot of money. It's money that already exists and flows from taxpayers to City Hall. City Hall is going to divert part of that tax base into the hands of the unelected board that runs the TERS. So, why do that? Why should taxpayers accept that kind of an arrangement? Karen?
I think I read an article about that in the Sierra Club newspaper that comes out every month or 2 months.
Right.
And I think they phrased it, well, the city can't afford to replace all those thousands of trees that died. And so they're going to have to give it over to the hands.
But you understand the fraud that's taking place there. All that the TERS has is tax dollars that would otherwise be flowing into the general treasury.
Well, I don't understand it, but it sounds screwy to me.
It is screwy.
When TERS money just comes out, they usually want to spend it on their own property, not on something outside of their property. So.
Understand, it's all city tax dollars that are putting in the hands of an unelected board of insider interest. It's not generating new money. It's simply money taken out of the general treasury, which you and I control theoretically.
The TERS diverts money from the property taxes to their own pocket,
Okay.
for their own uses, and then they're saying that they're using some of this up on Memorial Park. And I hate to tell you this, but those trees will grow back on their own.
More slowly, they're going to get, of course. But the point is, it's not a new pot of money, Jimmy. It's simply our money given in the hands of an unelected board. Brooks.
Yes, it's my understanding the money is already taken out of the city's tax benefit and belongs to the TERS now already. So it appeared to me that if they were to assume responsibility for Memorial Park, which is a tax-exempt acreage, that as a citizen, I might prefer more trees for Memorial Park than another housing project that the city funds.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and maybe it would give us a reason to say this might be better off than we currently are. But the problem is, at the same time, the mayor is giving her okay on building this BRT line, and that's the multi, I think. What did I hear? $90 million of wasted money, not even counting the interest charges on the debt they'll issue. So it's obviously not as simple as I first thought. That's a very good point. But I think the bottom line is still it's a bad idea. Quickly, John.
Just one point. You're correct. I don't see how somebody could get the idea that BRT was going to increase any kind of commerce or something in the Galleria area. It makes me wonder, does somebody who's behind this have plans to develop something further out?
Well, if you're looking at it carefully, you don't benefit by putting in something that's going to take land away from you as a privately owning commercial interest, and it actually weakens the ability of transit to serve that land.
And Galleria, but suppose somebody decided that we need another center somewhere else, and the Galleria, if it folds a little bit, will push.
But it's the Galleria area interests that are promoting this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to one more item, and then we'll go on to our main presentation. Something I did not pass out because I think you got enough paper is something from the Yalek Law Firm, and this is a letter, a press release from when was this? Gosh, there's not a date on this thing, but it was I think it was last February, and what it is apparently. The Greater Houston Partnership, which of course gets tax dollars from the county and from the city, was resisting turning over information to a political activist who spoke to us a couple of times in the past, Jim Jenkins. And Jim was taking the position that because they take money from our local governments, they are an arm of government, and they should be forced to give up information. And they went to court, and they went to an appeals court, and they lost. So this is very interesting. So the Greater Houston Partnership, which likes to posture itself as the voice of business, is actually a tool of our local government, and is trying to act like it's not, and it's not open to a person's request for information. And this decision says that they are, that they must. And I think that's quite exciting. It helps, I think, expose the partnership as not really the friend of business. They're a friend of government, and they're trying to act like they are immune from the normal ways that a citizen can try and monitor governmental activities by using the open records law. I gave out one copy, and I have other copies here if anybody would like to have a copy of this press release.
They're a tool of crony capitalism. Now we know. Right.
Well, it was evident before. We knew that they're getting tax dollars, but the fact that they now have been, now they're open to open records requests, and this is not something that they wanted to see happen.
An example of that would be the John Nell Cultural Center.
Let's use it.
An example of that would be the John Nell Cultural Center, whose economic impact study was done by the Greater Houston Partnership, and I think I've already detailed how ignorant that report is, where they compared visitor centers on the borders of communities on highway interstates with that cultural center and how it would be impactful to Houston when it's 150 miles away from the closest border.
This is something which is being proposed but not yet built?
Oh, no. The city's going to go and allocate the land. We're going to end up paying for the property. John Nell's supposedly put in $8 million worth of antiquities and calling on his friends to also donate.
So but his name will go on it.
And I would assume that there will be some Sports Authority monies, hotel taxes, motel taxes, that'll be diverted, further siphoning off money that's supposed to be paying off the bond issue. I'm guessing that will probably go towards this entity too.
Okay, there's more that we can monitor. Now, lastly, I almost forgot the multi-page handout. As many of you know, I was up in Austin this past week, and that's why I missed our meeting. I was put on a workshop at the biennial meeting of the National Convention of the Republican Liberty Caucus. This is the free market Ron Paul wing of the Republican Party. And I was up there giving a workshop on local activism. I had a table as well. I had a number of handouts, including this multi-page document. And I think you'll look through this, you'll find it's pretty persuasive to show that a handful of activists in the small cities of Texas can be very, very powerful. The law gives us the ability to amend charters with petitions or to get elections that will amend charters. Small cities only have 1 or 2 voting sites. A dozen or so activists on election day can get enough signatures to get a referendum to amend the charter so you can start to limit the growth in taxes, get sunset review on land use codes and business regulation, prohibit the use of drones and red light cameras, stop the politicians from giving tax dollars away to their friends. It's a very powerful tool, mostly unused by Texans at this point, and I'm trying to spread the word that it's actually available to us. And I believe it's actually available to maybe all 50 states or almost all 50 states. They all seem to have some kind of mechanism that allows for a local initiatives of one kind or another. So, having said that, let me move on to our main speaker. And I just realized that I forgot to bring the bio of our speaker, so I'll tell you what I read from memory. This gentleman, Louis Albach, was for a long time an employee of the city of Houston. He can tell us when he comes up here what he was doing for the city. But he also writes books on river travels, and I guess mostly, or maybe not only, Texas rivers. And he did a major study on Buffalo Bayou, looking at the land uses that materialize over time and how they evolve from one owner to another. Really, it's a fascinating book. I hope our speaker brought copies of his book to sell. I urge you all to get one. I've enjoyed what I read from mine. And of course, if you got the notice, you also saw I had a link to his webpage, and he very conveniently shows you several, it looks to be like preliminary chapters for his book, so you can sort of get you may already have a sense of what an excellent writer and how thoroughly he researches his subject. I'm just stunned at how thorough he is. So it's my pleasure to give you Louis Albach.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. I need to get our screen set up here.
Let me mention, if you don't think you've got a good sight, I want you to just move your chair right now while he gets things positioned, so you all get a good view. Karen, you may want to move, and Louis, you may want to move. Anybody want to move closer? Bring your chair up if you need it.
The only reason I say that is if you see something, you probably won't fall asleep in my talking. It might interest you more to see the screen. But basically, as Barry was saying, it was interesting. When he asked me to come talk here, I was kind of puzzled about what to talk about, because I'm not an expert in any of the things that you all just went through talking about. And so I decided that just about everybody likes a boat ride, so I'm going to do a talk that I do for a lot of the recreational groups, which is to replicate a virtual canoe trip down Buffalo Bayou. Now, there's sort of a backdoor thing to this, because surprisingly, there's an amazing amount of history along the bayou, and hopefully some of it you haven't heard before. And this way it kind of opens up the idea that this resource we have in the city of Houston is a tremendously valuable resource that's for many years been underrated, and fortunately is starting to get a little bit of our own attention. The Parks and Wildlife Department actually came in with a number of groups in town, including the Houston Canoe Club, of which I belong, the Buffalo Bayou Partnership, the Bayou Preservation Association, the Sierra Club, and actually set up and designated an official Texas Parks and Wildlife Canoe Trail. And this trail goes from out here near Highway 6, and it goes all the way into the downtown area. We're going to only look at the part between Interstate 610 or Loop 610 down through the Memorial Park area, because otherwise we'd be here about 3 hours. It's just a lot of stuff, and we're going to rush through this anyway. And so hopefully you will be as pleased as I am. By the way, I did bring some copies of my book, and I want to show it to you because, yes, sir?
I want one.
Oh, you want one? It's a huge tome, and if you get tired of reading it, I've been told it makes a great doorstop. So it's a multi-purpose thing. So anyway, we're going to put in at Woodway, and I always like to point this out, that when you get on the water, you get a whole different perspective of what the city is like. And if you go in at Woodway and start dropping down through Memorial Park, not only do you get a whole different perspective, but you can hardly believe that you're in the geographic center of the 4th largest city in the United States. It's a typical riparian woodland. especially if you look to your left-hand side, which would be the north side, and not to the right-hand side, which is where the River Oaks Country Club and other neighborhoods are. The left-hand side, the riparian woodland, has been basically untouched in a natural sense since 1838, maybe 1820, I don't know, when the first Anglos came into this area. Yes, sir, you have a question?
Help me out on the definition of riparian.
It just means the type of vegetation that grows along a riverway or waterway.
Is that body on the right-hand side floating been identified yet?
That's probably my canoe partner. Let's see. Also, as you go under certain of the things, such as this is the railroad bridge in Memorial Park, we get some rapids. So at low water, you get this sense of being in the Texas Hill Country. And that's kind of a joke, but it is.
Is that rock or dirt?
That is actually a rock layer. There are actually some quite large rock layers in the Memorial Park, some sandstone, which you don't see downstream. It does create a little riffle, but it's very nice. This part of the bayou actually is like a free-flowing stream. It backs up once you get to the New Brennan Steakhouse, because that's the head of tide, and so the tide actually stops the flow at that point.
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
How much does the water drop from the beginning of your area to the very end? I mean, does it drop?
Feet-wise?
Well, I mean, does it drop a foot or?
Yeah, a foot's about as much as it would drop. It does have flow, though, as you can see, but just enough. So anyway, we look here, and somehow or another my slide is truncated there, but you can still see in this area these large clay deposits, these red clay that's part of the natural coastal formation. It's exposed in Memorial Park, but in 1837, it was exposed in the downtown area. And you may be familiar with Sam Houston Park and the Kellum Noble House. Nathaniel Kellum was an early settler. He came to Houston, and he was, 21 years old and looking for his fortune, and his fortune was in making bricks. And in Sam Houston Park, there's a small depression with a lake. That's where they extracted the clay. He operated a brickyard using this red clay to make bricks. His home, which is in Sam Houston Park, was built in 1847 out of these bricks, the oldest brick structure in the city of Houston on its original location. It's painted white, so you can't see the red bricks, but scrape the paint. You have a question?
Kennedy Bakery?
1861. This was 1847.
Okay.
Probably out of the same bricks, though.
Is that snow? I mean, from previous years?
No, that actually is some kind of deposit from the higher water, but we don't get much snow in Houston.
Well, man, it snows over here.
And as we go downstream, we're right at the edge of Memorial Park. This is our canoe group. There's a large sandbar. And one of the reasons, and I think what you were seeing was part of the white sand that does appear in there. The reason I put that there is because now we're going to go into the more urbanized area. But before we get there, I wanted to remind you that Memorial Park was the site of Camp Logan. From that spot where we were camped, there is actually a little trail that goes up into the park area, into the wooded area where you have the ruins of a large bridge that was across the bayou that went into the area that is today the River Oaks Golf Course. But in 1917, it was still farmland. One of the other things that we find is that this is a good overlay of the Camp Logan map on Memorial Park. So you can see that most of Memorial Park was indeed part of Camp Logan. Several areas of the park have been developed as the golf course and tennis courts and so forth, but a number of areas have been undeveloped. And in those wooded, undeveloped areas, we have ruins of Camp Logan. Just last week, I had a gentleman from New York, a professor at Queens Community College, called me, and he wanted to come down and look at Camp Logan. He's writing a book on the 45 military bases established for the American Expeditionary Force, of which Camp Logan was one. And the reason he wanted to come was that Camp Logan was on Memorial Park, and because it was sort of protected by becoming Memorial Park, it wasn't redeveloped. Of the 45 or 44 other sites, they were all either completely abandoned and sold off and developed by private industry, or they became parts of other military bases. We have one of the only remnants of those American Expeditionary Forces in Memorial Park. One of the problems, you mentioned the issue of the TERS. I've been trying to talk with Joe Turner and anybody who'll listen about protecting these ruins when they go in with their big trucks. I had to do that one time last year when they first started cutting the trees down. I'd walked into the park and the big tractor trailer type devices were breaking the ruins. He did send the flagman out the next day, and so I think they've stopped crushing the ruins. We've applied to get the state archaeological landmark status for these ruins, and that's in process, and hopefully we can protect them. Yes, sir.
Which is older, Ellington Field or?
Both Ellington Field and Camp Logan were assigned at the same time during the build-up to entry into the First World War. So they were companions, and actually the training took place between the two of them. In other words, aircraft flew from Ellington up to Camp Logan, and they were coordinating their efforts there. So if you ever hear anything about the ruins of Camp Logan, please say we need to preserve these and maybe even develop a interpretive historical trail. Because if you don't know it, the only reason we have Memorial Park is because some concerned citizens wanted to save the area where these soldiers trained. And I'll get off my soapbox on that one. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
Well, they were black soldiers.
Well, I'm going to talk 2 minutes to that because A, there were a group of black soldiers, but B, the riot occurred before the camp was built. It occurred in July during the construction phase, and then we had 34,000 troops come in, one group of which was from Chicago, the 370th, an all-black regiment, a very historic all-black regiment. They didn't riot, they served in France, 75 Croix de Guerre, and were basically unknown in the rest of history until just recently. There's a lot of work.
About 20 of them, or 30 of them were hanged.
Yeah, but those were not part of the Expeditionary Force. They were part of the regular army, the 24th Infantry.
What did they do to be found?
There was a small riot in which about 25 people were killed. Anyway, that's a whole different story.
My father was in the Navy in 1919. My mother was pregnant with me. She said she played chess one night with the captain, the doctor from Camp Logan. The next day he was dead. Influenza.
Right. We had a severe influenza epidemic. Camp Logan is one of the hottest topics right now, and I will have a book out probably in the fall on Camp Logan, so maybe we can come back and talk about that. I just wanted to mention it because it is such a significant feature of the park, and so few people who use the park even understand the meaning of it. By the way, here are the locations of where the ruins are. If you want to walk in the park, you might stumble over some of those. There are significant amounts of ruins in the park.
Can you point them out, Louis? I can't see them.
No, let me go back. Everything in red.
Red. Barry, where are the red boxes?
I'm red, green, colorblind.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a red dot. Everything in red has significant amounts of ruins.
Where is Woodway in relation to that?
This is Memorial Drive.
Oh, that's
and then Woodway branches off. This is Memorial Drive going right through the park.
south of
Right here is that railroad bridge.
The rail.
This is, you just come in.
Right.
Is it on the polo field?
What's that?
Is it under the polo field or something?
No, the polo field is up over here, right here. This is the polo field. This is the railroad right-of-way.
Oh, I see.
Okay. This is the golf course. There's a lot of wooded.
Here has really had some of the barracks, and that's all residential housing.
Right. This was all part of the camp, even in this area. But then it was after the camp closed, it was developed as a housing development.
Crestwood.
Right, the Crestwood subdivision.
I bought a very good thin book at the Arboretum once. They store at the Arboretum
Right.
on Memorial Park, on the history of Memorial Park. I can't think of the title of it. Thin, but very good, lots of pictures.
Right. It does have some errors, though, related to Camp Logan.
Yeah.
We'll correct those. So let's, I can see y'all are extremely, we could be here an hour talking about Camp Logan, but let's go on downstream because there's another significant historical spot located at Shepherd Drive. This was the location of Shepherd's Dam. It was built about 1895 by David P. Shepherd. He was the manager of the Houston flour mills, and believe it or not, he thought he could replicate the mill race type of activity and run Buffalo Bayou water through a mill structure and modernize industry in Houston. But he was unsuccessful at that in terms of his project. This is a picture of Shepherd's Dam in operation. One of the things he forgot to calculate into his project was the fact that we have tremendous floods on Buffalo Bayou, and he spent most of his fortune repairing the bayou and not building the mill races. But by 1907, the city had built a little road across, and the dam actually backed up about 3 miles of the bayou and was a well-known recreational area, as you can see from this vintage postcard.
How did that get some blue water right there?
This is called Poetic License.
That's a sketch?
Yeah, it's a colorized postcard, I think. So the colorizee or the colorizor decided it was better to have it nice and blue.
And this is upstream of the dam?
Yes, we're looking towards the dam, which is where Shepherd Drive is. In fact, we were down on the bayou, and the bayou is a wonderful place because it still has a lot of stuff. And the last summer, when the water was very low during our drought, we were able to locate, here's some brickbats. The dam was made, as you could see, from timbers and brickbats put in them. And if you look down here, you can see that there is a section of timbers breaking out of the sand, and this is a close-up of the stacked timbers. There's another set this way. We believe these are portions of that wooden Shepherd's Dam.
What's a brickbat?
What's a brickbat? It's just bricks, and they put it with soil and stacked them into these wooden boxes.
Oh, you mean it was just used as a big old weight?
Right.
Shepherd Drive named after him?
Yes, Shepherd Drive, there's a common misconception that Shepherd Drive was named after Benjamin A. Shepherd, who was a distant cousin of David's. Actually, they usually think of it the other way around because Benjamin Shepherd was much more successful. However, the roadway, there was a small road coming off of the San Felipe Road, and you'll find it on some early maps. It was called the Shepherd's Dam Road. And if you go to the Texas room, that map actually was annotated to be spelled Shepherd's D-A-M-N Road, but we do think that it was not normally that way.
What are the current attempts now to kind of unpollute the brown water?
Well, actually, since the early 90s, there's been a tremendous effort to take the bacteria out of the bayou. You can't take the brown water out because that's standard coastal runoff. It clears up when the drought's here, and you can actually see clearly through the water. But as soon as it rains, we get the sediment coming downstream. What they have removed is the bacteria from the sewage treatment facilities upstream, which were polluting it. It was on the death list of the state back about 1990 because in the memorial villages they had a very poorly operating sewage treatment facility.
When did that dam give way? Was it a flood or something? Or?
Which dam?
The Shepherd's Dam.
It kept breaking up because of the high waters. You know, every time it rains 4 or 5 inches, well, it would break through the dam and then he would try to repair it. It was not really a very well put together dam. Some people referred to it as Shepherd's Folly. So but it is an interesting sidelight and has become a significant thoroughfare in our city. Yes, sir.
Is all this stuff at risk because of all these plans to move up to 610 Reach and fix the Bayou?
I'm going to say generally yes. We are working with the archaeologists to either preserve this or expose it enough that, you know, do the research and find out what was really there. As you go upstream, they want to do some channelizing that will take away a lot of the natural efforts of the bayou to cure itself. So there's still a lot to be worked on in that area. This is the location of Shepherd's Dam. That picture was taken right here. This is the location just below the new highway bridge. And so you can't see it in this picture because the water has risen back to a more normal level. One of the things that the Buffalo Bayou Partnership is doing right now is developing the hike and bike and green space along Buffalo Bayou from Shepherd Drive into the downtown area. And this new pedestrian bridge has just opened within the last 30 days or so. Yeah, it's very new. I just walked over it. And these improvements are sorely needed, especially if you do any hiking and had to walk across that 1.5 foot wide sidewalk on Shepherd Drive. So this is a great thing, and it's also really opening up our bayou green space. I just put this picture in to show you that it's still a little bit wild, and what has happened here is a tree has fallen across the bayou and creates one of those ugly surprises that if you're on the waterway that we call strainers, creates some strange water, and you could, if you turned over, you could be trapped in there. So just be alert to that if you're on the water. But I wanted to get on farther downstream to the new Rosemont Bridge. Has anybody been to see the Rosemont Bridge? This is an extremely artistic bridge that was put in about 2010, 2011. But not only that, it's a very historic bridge in the sense that this bulkhead, if you'll see this bulkhead, the bridge actually connects into the old railroad right-of-way. This bulkhead was an 1880s railroad right-of-way, and if you're an old-time Houstonian, you might even remember the trestle that went across there. It went from what is known as the Stella Junction. You're probably familiar with the street Stella Link, which was a street connecting the Stella Junction of the Galveston, Harrisburg, and San Antonio Railroad, coming out of Harrisburg and going to Richmond and San Antonio. Well, in 1880, Thomas Pierce, who owned that railroad, felt he was missing out if he didn't make connections to all of the railroads on the north side of the bayou. So he built this connecting track and went right through. This is, if you're not familiar with where this location is, it's just east of the Studemont Bridge.
Louis, I'd like to point out that I was personally disappointed to see them tear down that old bridge. It wasn't that long ago.
About 2000, yeah. The trestle, you mean?
Huh?
The trestle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that, in my mind, was truly historic. It's a sign of an earlier phase of Houston activity. And I suspect they did that with money that came out of a management district.
No, actually, I've heard, and I don't have documents on it, but Southern Pacific took it down themselves.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Were they asked to by the city?
I think they went through a whole period of consolidation and reducing liabilities, and that would have been a liability to them. It was fairly unused. I don't think it was used in years. Yes, sir.
Am I correct that about 90% of the hike and bike, except the stuff right by the Bayou, is old railroad?
The hike and bike along Buffalo Bayou?
Buffalo Bayou seems to look where I find old railroads on the old maps.
No, I don't think so. The railroads were either north of Washington, Center Street is where the route went, or they were way south. The only two railroads cross north to south, one of which is in Memorial Park, and the other is this one.
I'm referring to things like that, Lord, what do they call it now? But it's some name, I'll have to remember it, but the thing is, it's got...
It was that close to the water, but Mullen was flooding.
Right.
The part of the railroad's still there now, but it just, where it obviously continued on and crossed...
I don't know. So anyway, this railroad crossing actually was a tremendous boon to industry in the 1880s in Houston. They built the railroad spur, and in this picture this is from the south to the north, crossing the bayou, and this is a blow-up of it. As you can see, the smokestacks indicate industry. What happened here was that the Howard Cottonseed Oil Company built a mill. They were one of the first ones to build a mill here, and the interesting thing is the general manager of that plant was Thomas Cheney. And if you're familiar with the railroading in Houston, this rail line connected with the Houston and Texas Central just north of Center Street at what is known today as Cheney Junction. It was named after Thomas Cheney. I wondered about that for probably 5 years until I finally found the reference to that.
Before you leave this, Logan, I'd like to point out that years ago I was talking to a retired ancient insurance man. I forget his last name, his first name was Augie. And he knew this part of the town back about the time that the bird's eye map was drawn. And he pointed out that they were exaggerating the number of two-story houses. And I think there's another way that these were produced by the railroad companies of the era to promote these parts of the country that they had their rail going to. So they would exaggerate as they would with these very voluminous smoke plumes, the level of economic success in these cities by exaggerating the size of the buildings.
Not only that, the maps were sold on subscription, and so people who had very upscale homes had very detailed drawings because they would then be able to say, oh, there's my house on this bird's eye map. It's good for us because we as historians looking back can go and identify precisely buildings and their locations at this time period. And so it's a double-edged sword there. They did exaggerate, but they also did some very good drawings so that they could sell more of these maps.
Let me ask you about this right here. Was that actually built or was that simply envisioned?
What's this?
Where we see this parking.
The looping,
yeah,
that's Glenwood Cemetery. It's a idealization of the roadways in it. This is the right-hand side, and you can see the left-hand side.
Glenwood, which way is that map facing?
It's looking south.
Okay, good.
The bird's eyes seem to always come from the north, going across to the south. But you're right; they do have idealizations. Now, the interesting thing about this right-of-way is that they built this new bridge. And have the Houston Arts Alliance has commissioned this artwork. This is a sculpture by Jaume Plensa from Barcelona, Spain, called Tolerance. It's actually 7 figures of this same type sitting on a rock, and it's on the Allen Parkway side of the bayou. It may not be obvious from this picture, but it shows there. It's lighted in the evening. It's very nice. Quoted price on this is in the millions of dollars. It was paid for by the Arts Alliance and by the Aga Khan. Anybody know who the Aga Khan is? He's the head of the Ismaili Islamic community in the world. And the reason he helped fund this was that he had purchased the old RPW warehouse, which was on the other side of Allen Parkway. If you're familiar with the RPW warehouse, it was actually the first Sears Roebuck store in the city of Houston. It got flooded in the flood of 1935, and Sears decided to move to South Main Street. And so then the building was used just as a commercial warehouse. Yes, sir?
I thought it was also used as Baylor Medical School.
There was a time when Baylor was forming, and they did use it for a short period of time.
I taught there.
You did? Well, see, you've got first-hand experience.
He was very young.
Now, that building was torn down. It was planned to be a mosque, a huge mosque, and apparently it's been sold and will go to another use.
Well, it will be a Ismaili Islamic center shortly. In fact, I noticed that the front-end loaders are out scraping the land right now.
What is that sculpture made out of?
It's a stainless steel mesh, and it includes characters from every major alphabet in the world. It's not the only one he's done. This gentleman has artworks all across the world, and he's used this mesh before. The 7 reclining figures, he says, are representative of the 7 continents in the world. So, but anyway, it is an interesting evolution of the various land uses, if that's the thing that is of real interest. When we look back through history, we see a lot of changes, and it's interesting to be able to keep on top of the changes. Yes, sir?
On the other side of the bayou, didn't there used to be rice elevators?
Yes, in fact, we didn't go through the history of the industrial district, but after the cottonseed oil refinery business tapered off, it became a flour mill. It was a grain elevator. And I think it was finally imploded about 2001, 2002.
No, it would have been
it was a little earlier than that?
I think it was in the 19-something.
Yeah, it was fairly recently because...
I was there when they demolished it.
Oh, you did?
And it was a bad job. It wasn't a building. They tried to do, I think, 2 or 3 at a time, and one tipped over and leaned against another one.
Oh, they didn't.
That was a difficult finishing.
Well, let me ask you, did you get a picture? Because I regretted not getting a picture of that when it happened.
I think there might be a newspaper photo. I think I saw one.
Well, I was hoping to get your personal one, then I wouldn't have to pay the royalties for the Chronicle.
He's going to charge you royalties.
Yeah. So that's an interesting spot in the bayou as we go down. As you can see, there are a lot of places that have a lot of historical topics, but they are very current even in today's time. This is just an illustration of some of the construction that's going on today to re-stabilize the banks of the bayou. This is right around the bend that includes the police officers' memorial. And as we go past that, we get to the Sabine Street Bridge. And the Sabine Street Bridge into the downtown area has already been developed as the Sabine to Bagby Promenade, and so it also has a number of interesting features. I wanted to point out, wrong one, let me go back. These entryways with the stainless steel canoes over each of the walkways down into the bayou area. They're done by a local artist, John Runnels, who has a fascination with canoeing in the bayou, and so when they were looking for things to highlight these entryways into the city, he won the commission on that. They go very nicely with our Sabine Street Bridge. It's one of my favorite bridges in Houston. It was built in 1924 during a period of time of the what they called the City Beautiful movement, which meant that if the civic fathers had to build build functional structures that if they made them beautiful and pleasing, that the citizens would become better citizens. And we know that that's been the case over the last 80 and 90 years, right?
Right, absolutely.
Now, there were actually 3 bridges built at the same period of time. One at Shepherd Drive to replace that little steel bridge that we saw earlier, and one at Waugh Drive. Both of those are gone. We have those no longer, simply because as the city grew, we needed north-south thoroughfares, and they tore those earlier bridges down to replace them with more modern bridges. The only reason we have the Sabine Street Bridge is that, well, I'll ask you a question. Yeah, where does Sabine Street go? It goes from Memorial Drive to Allen Parkway. And so we have this wonderful relic from the 1920s. It's actually a very beautiful bridge, and if you look at it closely, you can see it's for that time period was a very advanced use of reinforced concrete.
Louis, before we leave that picture,
Oh, okay.
on the south side, to our right, I believe, would be the 4th Ward.
Yes,
On the north would be the 6th Ward.
right,
But for a time, it was all the 4th Ward.
right.
Can you tell us the story of how they came to split them up?
Well, okay, just briefly, the ward system just simply drew a line through the downtown district. Main Street was the one axis, and I believe it was Congress was the other. So everything in that southwest quadrant from Congress to Main and out was the 4th Ward. Well, that meant that the 4th Ward took part of the north side of the Bayou. And as the railroad companies started growing in the 1870s, like the Houston and Texas Central, they had their shops up in the north side of the Bayou there. And that's where a lot of craftsmen and other railroad workers lived, many of whom were German immigrants. And so it became a very conservative part of the community. The south side of the Bayou after the Civil War became the location where most of the blacks coming into the city where they lived, and that was the lower 4th Ward, sometimes known as the San Felipe District. So you can tell right away in the last part of the 19th century they had 2 very different political philosophies. And so that was the impetus for the group on the north side to appeal to get another ward district. They felt they couldn't be represented in the council properly with 2 distinctly different political views.
That was about 1896?
I believe it was a little earlier than that, in 1880s, but that's about the right time frame.
Oh, it is 1905 or 1907?
In 1907, but isn't that the time where they did away with the wards?
I think so.
Yeah.
The lower right picture, where can we see that?
That is at Sabine Street. It is actually right here, just on the north, or on the south corner. There are actually 8 of those in the downtown area at different street entries, and all of them have a little different verse on them. Yes.
Is that a canoe upside down?
Yes, it's as if you were having a birch bark canoe, a skeleton. It's the framework of a canoe that was wrapped with either bark or canvas.
Or would be if you wanted it to float.
Right, but it's made out of stainless steel, so it really goes right to the bottom. Yes, sir.
Yeah, those are found in several places along the walkway downtown.
Right.
Where the sides of the bayou have been developed. But I wanted to mention that the Sabine Street Bridge is where a lot of the better and more famous photographs of the skyline are taken from the bridge.
Right.
You get a really terrific view of the skyline from there.
It's exactly right. In fact, since all of our network TV stations are on the west side of town, they all have pictures from this direction. We're actually working to get them to come around to the east side because there's some wonderful views from the east side as well. But it's hard to get them to do that. Yes, sir.
Some of the greatest basketball players in the United States played summer ball right there at Fondy Center.
Right,
You
exactly.
name some of the great NBA players, and you will have found them at one time or another at Fondy Center.
Exactly right. That's and that's very little noted.
Where's Fondy Center?
Fondy Center, right, it's on the north side of Sabine Street, right at Memorial, at Sabine, and
The apartment type deal?
next to the apartments. The apartments were built recently.
One they got the city parking lot around.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Are you sure about your orientation? I think the right side is the north side.
No, we're coming.
Is the north side.
That's where the canoe launch is, or the canoe pickup place. The bridge, the stairs going up the hill.
You're looking back towards.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm turned around. Exactly right. This one here is over here, but there is one over on this side.
Am I correct that canoe, or that depiction of a canoe, is more appropriate for places like Minnesota than Texas?
Yes. It's a boundary waters type canoe. But hey, he's an artist.
Give him some license.
Okay, let's go on. I just wanted to point out, when they reconstructed the I-45 bridge, TxDOT felt that people would zoom through town and not realize there was a bayou here. So in the renovations, they commissioned this artwork, these towers, or they're light towers made out of stainless steel. They're called Bayou beacons or whatever. And you can see there's a little railing here. So that now all those people going from Dallas to Galveston will know that they're in Houston and there's a bayou down below. Again, this is part of the great civic artwork that we have in the city that really goes unnoticed and unsigned. It's very little signage to show that we have some of these art pieces.
And this is also where 45 totally messed up Sam Houston Park.
Well, I don't think that maybe the original 45 did. The original 45 right-of-way, was put in 1954, but the road wasn't built until the 70s. But that's what cut the Fourth Ward in half and completely changed the dynamic of the African American community in Houston, because that used to be the main business area for the African American community. There's only one building remaining from that era, and that is the Antioch Baptist Church, which is in the little square created by the old Enron building and the Allen Center.
Maybe you know this, that around the country, city fathers use the National Road Building and the Urban Development Program to get rid of the old black neighborhoods that were typically close to downtown. There was no accident that would happen that way. Of course, it was cheaper, you could argue that way. So it was also a convenient mechanism to make dramatic changes.
Yeah, we try to just tell the facts, but that's certainly been the case in this instance.
It's now about 20 to 2, actually probably about 25 to 2. You're only halfway through your tour, I think.
No, we're just about to the end, but I can, when do you want me to stop?
Well, I'm just thinking 2 o'clock is when we're on.
Okay.
We can go over if we have to. I want to make sure we get to your book signing, too.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just run through some more of these wonderful sites. Now, the good thing, I'm just going to put a plug in. If you take my book, and you can go along the walkway, you can see all these sites and read about them. The book is chronological, going downstream, so as you walk downstream, you just look to your left and right, and there you go. And let's just move on down. That's Capitol Avenue. I'm not going to talk about... The only reason I put that in is that they put the new Harrisburg light rail line through here, and they had closed the bayou for a year, and it opened up in mid-March. So we'll move on past that. The Sesquicentennial Park is a great venue for some of the recreational and outdoor facilities. It's also a very historic area. This is the old homestead of Horace Taylor. And if you haven't studied Horace Taylor, he's one of the most interesting mayor. He was a former mayor of Houston. But he lived on this site from 1850 until he died, which I believe was 1891, and he refused to develop it. He had what they called an urban farmstead all the way up into the 1890s. He had cows and goats and the whole 9 yards on these 2 lots of downtown. When he died, his family immediately developed it. As you go under the Franklin Avenue Bridge, you have one of the most interesting features of the downtown area. This is the Donnellan Grave Vault, and you can, too bad. This is the entryway in. It no longer has any graves in it, but in 1849, Timothy Donnellan was the alderman from the First Ward, and he lived in this area. When he died, his family put him in a vault. They built a brick vault on the banks of the bayou. And you say, well, how do you know that? Well, I know it because when his wife died, she was buried there. And when their son, Henry, died, he was buried there. Henry was a Confederate veteran, which meant that on Decoration Day, you read in the newspaper, all of the veterans organizations listed everybody who received flowers, and all these people at Glenwood and all at Evergreen. And then they said, and Henry Donnellan on his gravesite on the bank of Buffalo Bayou. So we know this was a prominent feature until 1900, when the city wanted to build the first bridge across Franklin Avenue. They moved the graves, with the family's permission, to Glenwood, covered it over, and we lost track of it until just recently. We've been popularizing this historic site.
Can you walk in that doorway?
No, it's got a little door on it, and I'm not sure I would.
Maybe homeless people.
No, we don't get any homeless. My friend John's already been checking it out recently. We have, actually, the partnership is getting ready to complete the walkway along here, and so they had an engineering study done. The engineers put cameras in there, and all it is rubble, so they think the vault was actually destroyed during the bridge construction. But the engineers said we'd have to tear the wall down to find out, and we don't want to do that.
How'd they get a camera in there?
Just, one of these video things, they stick it through on a pole. They open the door. The door is just wood, and you can open it and look back behind it, and it's just rubble.
It's not a real good idea from what I heard.
No, but anyway, this when they build the walkway, everybody will be able to walk right up to it, and hopefully we can get us a historical plaque on it. I wanted to point out this ruined structure. We have a lot of ruins along the bayou. These structures here are not part of the bridge. They're actually part of the former Magnolia building, which was one of the buildings of the Magnolia Brewery. They had a little bit of hubris because they built this thing way out into the bayou, and they forgot that we had big floods, and in 1935 we had the largest flood in the city of Houston, and the day after the flood hit, the building collapsed into the bayou. And this is probably the very last photo taken of the Magnolia Brewery building. You can see it right here. This is the flood of 1935, 42.5 feet above sea level. It flooded the downtown district about 3 to 5 blocks off of the bayou. It ruined this building. It collapsed right in half, and
the Magnolia Ballroom.
Right. The Magnolia Ballroom, which is on the corner of Miland and Franklin, survived. It lay in ruins until 1967, when local architect Bart Truxillo bought it, has renovated it to its 1915 glory days. And if you have a party that you'd like to give in a very historic spot, you can rent that from Bart. It also has some bars and other things that are open there. Bart, when I was over there the last time, Bart was showing me a little tubing that came out of the railing near the stairwell. Well, the story is that Hugh Hamilton owned the Magnolia Brewery, and he wasn't a beer man, he was an ice man. But he thought he could hire a brewer, and he did, and he formed the Magnolia Brewery Company. It became the largest brewery in the Southwest prior to Prohibition. This little tube came out of the basement, and it was a copper tube with coils, And we think that that was the very first building in Houston that was air conditioned because he was pumping the coolant through that coil.
Let me mention that I, as a real estate broker, I actually had a listing on this building here, and it was sold to an oil man from Dallas before we had the downturn in the 80s. Then it was sold to a real estate man who lives there, so that's currently a residence.
Right.
This was an alleyway over the bayou. All that came down. The city, as you know, forbade them from rebuilding because as the water came down during the flood, it brought trees with it. It backed up behind all the structure and the pilings, and that's why the flood occurred, or why it was as bad as it was. That's some of my personal history with that. Let's talk about the buildings on the north side. Were they also part of the Magnolia Brewery?
The ones over here, this actually was the brewery. These were the stables for the horses that delivered the beer and other assorted delivery types. This was, the Magnolia building was more of an administrative building. I think it did probably store some beer at the time, but all of this is gone on the north side.
The owner of the building that I was involved with marketing it was a member of the Dixon family, and after Prohibition came on the scene, his family, the Dixon Meat Packing Company, bought that, and they had the refrigeration equipment here, and they used it to refrigerate meat.
Oh, so that's something I didn't know. I had to put that in my book now. Yes?
Lewis,
yes, sir.
Can you tell us about what may have been this 17th century privateers colony? Was it right around here?
Oh, no, not exactly. It was in the, where White Oak Bayou goes up towards Elder Street, and that's where that is. I'm not sure if it were privateers or, I'm not really up on the story of that. But the gist of it is there was some exploration, or thought to be some exploration by British in the 1600s, and they had somewhat of a colony, and they think that only because when they excavated for the fire department's new building, they came across these graves that were done in a style that was common in England in the 1670s or so, 1650s.
Wasn't that the Graveyard City Cemetery too?
Right. And the interesting comment was that where the modern graves, and I'm saying modern because it's late 19th century, they actually intruded into these, what they call black earth graves. And so that's how they could date that they were much earlier than the modern cemetery.
That's what Ken Brown does.
Ken Brown has done the work on that, and there's been a few newspaper articles in the Chronicle that talk about it a lot more. It's still an open controversy, and the last time I talked to Ken about it was he said, we just have to hope that the fire department needs a new building, because then they're required to do the excavation, because they couldn't go under the building to complete their excavations.
Is Allen's Landing in that picture?
Yes, sir, right over here, just the edge of. This is the Main Street Viaduct, the M&M building. This is now the Sheriff's Department.
Louis, before we leave the picture, right here, I understand that this was built on an old below-ground repository for munitions during the Civil War.
Oh, I don't think that's the case. You got a couple stories coming together. The M&M building was built on the site of the Sam Allen warehouse, and Sam Allen was an Allen brother. And during the Civil War, when they captured some of the soldiers at Galveston and at Sabine Pass, they put some of them there temporarily. Okay, and there's a plaque on the M&M building talking about that. The tunnel you're talking about was associated with the building next to it, which was the American Brewing Association building. He was the competition to the Magnolia Brewery. The American Brewing Association was formed by Adolphus Bush of St. Louis, and he opened his brewery a year after the Magnolia Brewery.
Is that M&M building, is that now the University of Houston?
Right, exactly. It's the University of Houston downtown campus, and they now have a building on this tract, and that's probably what Barry's referring to when they were preparing the foundation. they came across a tunnel and a shaft that went down to the bayou. But it was used primarily for sucking water out of the bayou for cooling the beer, and not the munitions part of it. There is, however, in the M&M building, in this location, of course it's underwater right now, but in normal times there is a tunnel that goes down to loading docks at the water level. This was built in 1928. There's an iron gate over the tunnel right now, but the loading docks are partially still there. The pillars are still in the water. It's not used anymore, but the M&M building was an attempt to combine this commercial activity in one building, where you had retail space, office space, warehouse space in one large building, and you took advantage of all three means of transportation. You had the waterway and that loading dock. You had the highway that went up. This was the old Montgomery Road. And on the north side of the building, you have the truck docks. And of course, the Houston and Texas Central line cut right through here. And you have the rail docks right there. You know yes, sir?
Still is a railroad track.
It still is. It's still very active. And you'll still see the engine go across that route. The interesting thing is that if you go to the University of Houston downtown campus, to the main office, it says, come to the third floor. Well, the third floor is actually where the main street road is, because the two layers are where the docks are below.
They didn't use bayou water to brew beer, did they?
We hope not.
That's actually my alma mater. I went to South Texas Junior.
Okay, well, that's the rest of the story. This building lay very unused from 1929. You all know what happened then, until 65 or 67, when the South Texas Junior College acquired it and started their college there.
And I'll mention that there was initially just on the north side of the building, maybe not all the floors. If you visited the south side, I actually found restrooms that said colored and white.
Right, that's because that was the old MKT depot. And if you go on J.R. Gonzalez's blog, he's posted recently, I'm not sure, maybe the last 6 months, some wonderful pictures of that old depot and the segregated waiting rooms.
Yeah, I don't think I was looking at the depot. I think I was just looking at the office.
Well, that may have been what was left. Well, it could have been in the office portion too. I mean, that was you know, the way life was. We got to get through here. Okay, this is where we take out. We're almost finished. I just wanted to show you this wonderful picture of the Allen's Landing area, which has been refurbished back to its Port of Houston days. It was the Port of Houston up until 1914. Yes, sir.
Are you taking that from Love Street Light Circus Feel Good Machine?
You mean this?
Yes, there's Love Street Light Circus Feel Good Machine.
I just wanted to leave you all on a...
You went to that place, but they had only mattresses on the floor.
Right.
I went
Oh, you had to, hey, do you have any inside snapshots? I ask everybody if they took any pictures inside so we can...
It was too dark.
This was a... Okay, let me tell what it was. This is the old International Coffee Company building. It was the site of the largest coffee company in the Southwest up until 1930, in which it went out of business. The warehouse stayed dormant until 1967, and David Addix, the gentleman here, went to San Francisco to the Summer of Love.
Yep.
He got so fascinated by the colors and the music, the psychedelic colors and the music, he leased the third floor of this building and established the Love Street Light Circus and Feel Good Machine. This is the poster that he lined the walls with. This is the one out of his studio, actually. I went over and talked to him. He's a very interesting guy, very easy to talk to. And he operated that for himself for 18 months, sold it, and it operated another 18 months, then it closed down. And we ran into the guy who painted, you can see some of the old striping on here, the guy who painted it green when the building closed down. The developer wanted it to disappear, so they painted it this ugly green. This painter went inside, and he said inside on all the walls, all of the artists who performed there signed the walls.
Oh, really?
And so I said, well, we got to go in there. So I got in touch with the partnership, and we rushed in there one day. Well, all the plaster had been knocked off, and it was just bare. But he was sure Jimi Hendrix's signature was in there.
Another footnote is I worked nearby at a place called the Gallery Opera House. I only got to this place one time because I usually was working at night. Of course, the owners that I worked for in the 60s, they sued Gerald Hines, who was putting in the Galleria, and they came to a financial settlement. And so right now, the remaining partner still has the right to put in a place in the Market Square and name it the Galleria.
No kidding. Very good. See, Barry, you've got a lot of the rest of the stories to the rest of the story. So anyway, that's just the end of our presentation. As you can tell, you put these pictures up here, and there are just so many questions and so many interesting stories about Houston. And I could only get as many as 750 pages would handle. There are a lot more. So if you're interested in more detail on them, I've got them in my book here. Yes, sir.
Just a couple of brief comments to augment your stories. Right there at the Sabine Street Bridge, you can get on a boat that takes a tour from there to the downtown area past Allen's Landing, turns around and comes back, and you can see, and they'll tell you about all these older bridges and viaducts and things that were in your pictures. It's a boat tour. They go slowly, and the people talk about it. Very interesting. Now, back at Loop 610, you can get in a canoe and head through Memorial Park toward downtown. What's interesting to me, I've been on the trip 3 times, I think. Just a few minutes from 610, as you're going down the Bayou, you don't hear anything. You did not hear the traffic on 610 or anywhere. It's just quiet. It's like you're in the forest primeval. And you'll be going along slowly and hear kind of whoosh, 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 and a great blue heron flies by. It's egrets and whatever. To see things like that, especially to be a great blue heron, and what amounts to downtown Houston, is just incredible. These are 2 things everybody
Any alligators ever get to this?
The only alligator I have seen has been at the old Rainbow Lodge at the Brenners, because I think they used to feed it. There was about an 8-foot alligator.
Yeah.
I have never seen them downstream, though. Yes?
From 59 to 62 is when I remember in junior high school, going over to Memorial Park and going on hay rides before they put Memorial in, and you could go right up next to the Buffalo Bayou where the picnic area.
Oh, right. You could go down there.
That hay ride, well, if you came up for air,
right.
Yeah, you could see it took you right by Buffalo Bayou.
Right.
From 59 to 62.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
That whole reach between Shepherd and 610 is the part that's at risk now for the next extension of the
It's the one that is most at risk, and we're worried about that.
And that's the most interesting thing for this organization here, because it's a combination of public money and private money to help the River Oaks Country Club.
Well,
2 million, big million.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly, but if you're reading between the lines, that's it.
That's the current thing. $6 million, $2 million from the River Oaks Country Club, $2 million from the city, and $2 million from the Harris County to fix the bayou.
Right, and also I believe they want to take all the trees off the banks and landscape them nice and green, and then we lose the last vestige of the wild bayou in Houston.
And that's to fix one T at the River Oaks Country Club because it's falling in.
Oh, they could move that, couldn't they?
Well, no, that's what they're going to do. They're going to move the bayou.
Right. Yes, sir.
Quick observation, and I hate to suggest this to this august organization that's anti-taxes, etc., anti-city spending, but I'd like to suggest an idea the city could spend a few more bucks on signs. I drive down, when I come to this meeting, I drive down Chimney Rock, and I cross Spring Branch, Hunters Creek, Buffalo Bayou, and possibly a fourth stream called Shady River, I think is the name of the street in Canoe. And none of them are identified.
Right.
And I'd like to see signs put up there.
I agree with you. There, you know, we have outdoor art.
Yeah.
We have a Henry Moore. I don't know if you know who Henry Moore is. Probably the foremost outdoor art artist in the world, and he died in the 80s. His work goes for multi-millions of dollars, and we have one sitting on Allen Parkway.
Yeah.
And there's no sign on it. There's no information hardly available. In my book, I tell you about it. But, you know, it's things like that, you know, they want to promote the city. We'll spend just a few bucks and let people know what's here.
Well, you think of the big race they have here once a year, 26-mile race.
Yeah.
Those runners must cross several of these waterways.
Exactly, right. Yes.
How far east can you canoe today, legitimately?
East, you can go all the way to the railroad bridge just past Hidalgo Park, because the sign says when you enter beyond this bridge, the Coast Guard will come escort you out.
And they will.
Are you bothered by insects on that canoe?
No.
No mosquitoes on the bayou?
Actually, there are very few. They're up in the brush. But when you're on the river or on the bayou, it's pretty clean. Yes, sir.
Are you allowed to use motorized?
Yes, the bayou is a navigable waterway according to the state of Texas, so it's open to the public. The problem is there's no access for a motor. I only know of one boat ramp, and it's down near Wayside, 69th Street, and it's used by the police and the county and the Buffalo Bayou Partnership. It's a locked facility. That's the only boat ramp between the turning basin and upstream.
Yes. What's the legal basis of the Coast Guard denying public access to the rest of the path out to the Gulf?
It's under the Homeland Security Act. They have authority to manage the waterways.
And privatize it, basically? Or?
It's not privatized. It's always been managed by the Coast Guard. And
but the public's not allowed to navigate that?
You can get a permit.
Oh, okay.
Now, and I know that because just a few weeks ago, the Galveston Yacht Club brought their yachts up and docked at Allen's Landing overnight. So, but it used to be, and I've talked to people, they say, oh, I live down in the Highlands, and that's what we do on the weekends. We'd get in our motorboat and go up to Allen's Landing. Well, that stopped in 2001. Yes, sir.
Did you ever, have you delved into the history of River Oaks? Because the Dickey family evidently used to have a dairy farm or
Oh, it could
out
be.
there
I'm not
under
familiar
what's
with
now
that.
River Oaks.
Yeah.
There's still some Dickeys around.
Interesting. Where was their dairy farm?
It was where River Oaks is now. I happen to know Tommy Dickey, he would be around 70 years old.
Yeah. No, I don't recognize. I didn't do a whole lot of work there, just the basics about the hog family buying the tracts and developing.
Louis, let me ask you about your research practices. I'm just awed by the level of detail you come up with. I've heard you went to the old census reports and you got all the information there. Am I right about that?
Yeah. I'm pretty fanatic about the documentation. You know, you asked what did I do in the city? I was the records management officer for the city. And then before that, I worked in the oil and gas business, keeping track of seismic data, well logs. So the detail is kind of ingrained into what I was doing. So anything that I get, I capture it and I load into my database. I have an extremely large database of information so that when you start to write an article, you just query your database, it dumps out all your notes, and it's a pretty easy process to then.
And you do a great job of weaving all that fascinating detail.
Well, that's the art, I guess, is, you know, you just don't, there's a narrative, and so many historians, you know, a good historian is one who weaves the narrative of the facts. And that's what I try to do.
And it's all highly readable, highly entertaining.
Well, thank you.
Let's get to the book signing.
Okay, well, thank you all so much. You had so many questions. And, you know, I'll cut down the number of pictures because every picture's worth 1,000 questions.